With week 6 in the books and several matchups that seemingly were going to be snoozers, the sixth week turned out to be Black Saturday for several teams. Want to find out who they are? Find out next on Gridiron Gab Triple Option. Welcome back, you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on another edition of Gridiron Gab Triple Option. I am, of course, Mr. CeeLo. As my intro was short and sweet because it doesn't get any better than Black Saturday. Because that's really what it was, you guys. Several big-time upsets that many of us didn't see coming. I certainly called a handful of these upsets, but I didn't call certain ones. But as it is, we will get to the top 25 at the end of the show, as we always do. But let's first go down Bloody Saturday. Starting with the Friday night game, which was one of the two top 25 teams, or the team sharing the 25 spot. The UNLV Running Rebels, whom seemingly had their stuff together, and unfortunately, the Syracuse Orange had different ideas as they pulled off a 44-41 upset. Well, it seemed as though that Malik Williams, you can't really blame it all on him, but when you score 41 points in a game, pretty much you're gonna win that game, unless the other quarterback on the other side is Kyle McCord, who threw 40 of 63, 355 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, I'm still not a fan of Kyle McCord. To me, he's in his element playing with the Syracuse Orange, a much smaller program. But you can't even argue that UNLV's offense was the problem. As I said, Williams had 227 yards passing and also 53 yards on the ground. However, when we look at the totality of this football game, you had 34 first downs by Syracuse. And then you look at the near 40 minutes of time of possession. And this is the theme for a lot of these teams. And listen, guys, I have always been a fan, and I said it in my show that I did in the Alabama-Vanderbilt upset, you guys. Vanderbilt did the same thing Syracuse did. They controlled the clock. Because what eventually happens is if you've got a team that is their defense is out there, as long as they're out there, there are so many things that start to leak. They start to, look at this, 492 total yards for Syracuse and only 354 for UNLV. And they converted 11 out of 18 first downs, whereas UNLV only had Syracuse converted 11 out of 18 third downs, whereas UNLV only attempted 7 third downs. And they were 3 of 7. And they also went for it 3 times on fourth down. I mean, you can see how UNLV was, more, in my opinion, the better team. But when you look at the stats and you look at every category that they had to win, they won it. They had to win every category that they won. And the biggest one they had to win was the turnover battle. But that was even. So when you really start breaking it down, you look at the rushing yards they won. Penalties was a big-time killer for UNLV, 9 for 108. So this is where I'm at. When I start analyzing a lot of upsets, I always try to look at little points that could be keys to the game. And when you really look here and you see that they ran darn near twice as many plays as they did. Look at this. You're looking at, they nearly busted 100 plays on UNLV. That's unheard of, you guys. They nearly doubled up the number of plays. There were almost 150 plays run in this game. Unbelievable. But Syracuse pulls away 41-45 as the Syracuse Orange give the UNLV Rebels their first loss of the season, more than likely knocking them from the ranks of the top 25. And we'll go ahead and we'll get the other matchup that was on Friday night. Number 6 Oregon Ducks, 31, Michigan State 10. I don't think there was any doubt in my mind that Michigan State was going to fall, but it was in doubt for a little bit. You know, it was 21-0 at the half, and the Ducks kind of coasted, knowing that they have a big matchup. And as we said, more than likely, if you're Oregon, as I said on the pre-show, they were trying to get out of this game. They were basically trying to get done and get out. Get away from this game so they didn't expose too much of themselves before the big game against Ohio State. As we continue to see Dylan Gabriel doing his thing. Now, he did struggle in this game. He gave up a pick 6 in this game. He went 20 of 32, 257 yards, 2 scores, and of course those 2 picks. But then the other story is Jordan James, 24 carries, 166 yards, and a touchdown. But really not much to talk about for Michigan State on the offensive side of the football. Really, there really was not. And that's going to be a huge issue for them going into their conference schedule, as they are 1-2 on the year, so it doesn't get easier for them. Footnote on the Ducks defense, Jordan Birch had 2.5 sacks and 2.5 tackle for losses. So that's going to be huge as these guys come in and they start getting into their conference schedule, them being Oregon. Now we're going to talk about the game that I called, and we are going to look in depth at the number 9 Missouri Tigers versus the number 25 Texas A&M Aggies. The Aggies absolutely dismantled the Missouri Tigers 41-10 in College Station. I don't want to say I called this. I would say I admit I felt like this game would be a lot closer than this. If it was going to be a blowout, it would be a 14-17 point blowout, not a 31-point blowout. I just believe that this A&M team was fueled by its crowd. They absolutely just obliterated them in all areas of the game. And honestly, this defense did not have what it didn't have what it took to do what it needed to do. Le'Veon Moss had 138 yards on the ground and 3 scores and had a 75-yarder. As a team, the Aggies ran for a grand total of 236 yards on the ground. In Connor Wigman's return, he had 33 yards on the ground as well as 276 yards while throwing 18 for 22. Now, there was a lot of talk, and as I said on my show, I was not sold on Missouri. I felt like Missouri had an easy road, and then when I went back and I looked, I did not realize this was going to be their first road game, period. Not the first road game of significance, but their first road game, period. I said right then, going into College Station for your first road game, you better have a top-notch football team. Notre Dame proved that, and it wasn't an easy victory for them. And listen, A&M showed that they are that good. Now, I'm not going to sit here and talk about the SEC because Mike Wilbon said something that normally he doesn't say anything this asinine. You're talking about how deep the SEC is. Look, we've seen Stanford knock off really good football teams, so let's stop doing this whole SEC narrative, please. It's not that, Vanderbilt's a pretty decent team this year. This was a game they wanted. This was a game they took, and it was in their building. Everything came together. So let's stop using this whole SEC is tough to win in. A&M just showed Missouri it was number 9. So we really going to say top to bottom they're that good when you got the 25 ranked team whooping up on the number 9 team? Or is it that the certain people in the press are just complete? Right, that's what I figured. Brady Cook was a guy that I was not sold on. He was 13 of 31, 186 and a score. And as I said, Luther Burden, a guy who is going to the NFL, had 7 grabs, 82 yards. But outside of that, there wasn't really much to talk about when you look at the Missouri Tigers end. It was, as I said, Drayden Norwood had 8 total tackles for them. And it was just, silence. I mean, they pretty much, in a nutshell, did what they wanted to do. I mean, there's just no other way of putting it. Missouri was overmatched. I think the crowd got to them, and they were rattled. I mean, they really were. I mean, and it's crazy considering A&M had 10 penalties for 79 yards. So, I mean, there's really nothing you can say. It was just A&M wanted it more, and they showed it. They were literally going to protect their house, and there was really nothing that Missouri could do except get back on the bus. Wheels on the bus. Sorry. Number 23, Indiana, put up a big win against Northwestern by scoring. This game was tied, by the way. So when I say this was Black Saturday, there were a lot of teams that were ranked that were on the ropes at one time. Northwestern being one of them. It was a situation where this game was close. And they ended up scoring 17 in the fourth quarter to pull away, to win it 41-24. As Indiana goes to 6-0 for the first time in forever. As Curtis Rourke had 380 yards on 3 touchdown passes. And Elijah Surratt had 7 grabs for 135 yards. On the other side, Bryce Kurtz had 10 catches, 128 yards on the day, as well as Indiana's receiver, Keyshawn Williams, had 4 grabs, 87 yards, and a touchdown. But as I said, Indiana's going to get a chance to prove itself as it continues to move up the rankings and show everybody what they're made of in all of this and what kind of players they're going to be. So it's going to be interesting to see as they really get into the meat of their Big Ten schedule and see what they got. An upset that I was not necessarily anticipating, because now you guys saw on the show I said it's possible you could look up an SMU's winning this game. Louisville had some breaks go their way, but it just wasn't meant to be. It was a fun game to watch. One of the best early games I've seen all season, as unranked SMU pulls out the victory over number 22 Louisville, as now Louisville has lost 2 in a row, as Tyler Shook had 329 yards and 2 touchdowns and an interception that was very costly. Isaac Brown had 117 yards rushing, and Ja'Cory Brooks had a great game. 3 grabs, 121 yards, 2 scores, including a beautiful 86 yards grab that was just beautifully done. The route was beautiful. Everything was perfect. There were plays that looked like Louisville was on the verge of starting to control this game, but right there, you had Kevin Jennings come in and take this game over. This guy almost had 300 yards passing and 100 yards rushing. This kid is amazing. I'm going to tell you something. If this kid stays at SMU, SMU's going to be on the map. Y'all watch what I tell you. This guy is going to be a baller. This sophomore, I'm telling you straight up, y'all keep an eye on him. Kevin Jennings, this guy is going to be the truth. Because I watched this, he is a lot of fun to watch. He is that darn near perfect mix of a quarterback that can run it and be very fast, and he can throw it accurately deep. I'm going to tell you, he is a very fun player to watch. He's a lot of fun to watch. And as I said, he was their undoing. I mean, when you get an athlete this good, it's hard to stop. And Louisville couldn't, and so they failed 34-27. And more than likely, this is pretty much going to destroy any hopes that they had of being in the college football playoff. But looking around here again, let's go to number 21, Boise State, and unranked 1-4 Utah State, as they rolled up 62 points en route to another easy win. But the story here is going to be running back Ashton Gianti. This guy is just 186 yards on 13 carries. This guy's amazing. 3 touchdowns. He's got to be at the top of the Heisman list. I mean, there is no way this guy is not at the top of the Heisman vote. And this guy is just absolutely incredible. I love watching him play. He is a lot of fun to watch. And I'm going to tell you, if you've never watched this kid play, you are missing out. He's like a pinball machine. The majority of the reason why you guys don't get to watch him is because he plays when the Owls are hooting. Yeah. But he's amazing. If you get a chance to watch a Boise State game, you guys have to go watch. He is simply awesome to watch. And I encourage all of you to go check this guy and many of the other late night teams that played, because this was fun to watch. Number 16, Iowa State over Baylor, 43-21. This game was close for about a half, and then all of a sudden you get the you're not on my level type of treatment from the Baylor Bears. Gab out to Steve Linton, my buddy on Baylor. He had 2 tackles in this game. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I mean, this game here is just one of those where Iowa State just said, hey, look, we're going to impose our will on you. They had 2 running backs that nearly had 100 yards rushing. Jalen Jackson and Carson Hansen. Jackson had a 107 and 2 scores, including a 51-yard scamper for a touchdown, and then Hansen had 97 on the ground. Not to mention Rocco Becht had 277 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. And Sawyer Robertson for Baylor had 258 yards and 3 scores. But outside of that, they didn't have much of anything. No running game whatsoever. Jaden Higgins had 8 catches, 116 yards, and 1 touchdown receiving for the Iowa State Cyclones, along with Jalen Noel, who had 5 catches and 98 yards. But Iowa State goes to 5-0. And moving up in that Big 12 conference and continuously impressing people with their ability to not only slow teams down, but they can balance that offensive attack. But we're going to see as they get into the real meat of their schedule if they're able to bring that boom to the boom boom. You know. But as it goes, number 15, Clemson against unranked 1-5 Florida State. As Clemson was able to pull out a 29-13 victory and put Coach Norvell on the hot seat even further. That seat is definitely roasting right now. And as much as I hate to see this, it's not a good day for Florida State football. And I'm not saying that this is gonna go down, but it's tough to see a program go from being where they are to just absolutely, it's like this whole Georgia Tech game has put Florida State in a downward spiral. And it all really started in essence to when they got shysted for the national championship. And it's like they haven't been able to recover. And it's a shame because I like Coach Norvell. I like him a lot. But I hope he hangs in there, and I hope these guys can turn it around because they do have a tough schedule. Maybe they can get it together and be able to, get some things going before the season ends and bring some positivity there that will make Florida State hold on to them. But we'll just have to see. But let's take a look at the game in its totality. I mean, Dabo Swinney's doing his thing. I was impressed with the way in that game against Clemson. I mean, Clemson's game against Georgia. Phil Maffa didn't do much. And I'm looking at this, and I'm saying to myself, where was this offense against Georgia? The Cade Klubnik run it for 11 times for 62 yards. Phil Maffa, 154 yards on the ground. Klubnik, 19 of 33, 235, and 2 scores. Then you look over here and you see Antonio Williams, 3 catches, 84 yards, including a 57-yarder. Looks to me like you got a case of, I don't want to do what I do when the big boys come to town. That's what it looks like to me. I may be wrong, or I may be overthinking, but that's what it looks like to me. I'm not one of those guys that's a conspiracy guy on everything. I just look at what's around me and what's going on around me, and then I just put two and two together. And you can say I make assumptions, but the reality of it is I look at it from the standpoint, why is it you don't attempt to run these same type of plays when you're playing the tougher competition? I mean, that's all I'm saying. And you would be surprised how effectively it might work if you actually try it that way. And what I'm saying about Phil Maffa is trying to get Phil Maffa in situations where he can run downhill. You get defenses like Georgia flustered, especially if you run something misdirection. We saw that work well against with Vanderbilt in Alabama. Oop. Didn't want to get ahead of myself. Number 12, Ole Miss 27, unranked South Carolina 3. Now, I called this game as an upset. I called South Carolina, much like many of us analysts, because many of us were not sold after Ole Miss dropped the game they lost last week to Kentucky, because we all felt as though that South Carolina's front four, possibly front seven, was much better than Kentucky's. I guess either we were wrong or I was wrong about Lane Kiffin being able to coach in the big games. Now, this ain't really a big game, but South Carolina did come in 3-1, and they were playing in Columbia. So I felt as though this crowd was going to be crazy. Jackson Dart was in a hostile environment. He was not in a hostile. He was at home last week. And lost to a team of this caliber. But I will say this is where I have to tip my hat to Lane Kiffin. You got your boys up, you got them ready to play, and they showed up. Now, I will say this, Jackson Dart was not great. He was 14 of 27, 285 yards. The defense, however, showed up in a big way. You talking about, even though South Carolina ran the ball for 150 total yards on total, you as Ole Miss, you kept it balanced. You ran for 140 and got 3 scores on the ground. But then here's the great equalizer. Jackson Dart, even though he wasn't perfect, he threw for 285 yards. And see, when you can do that, when you can get the ball to your playmakers, such as Antoine Wells and Trey Harris, as well as Jordan Watkins, when you can get these guys the ball, and they both have over 70 yards, Wells almost had 100 yards receiving. So when you can do that, when you can get that type of production from your passing game on top of your running game, that's going to spell mounds of success for your program. And then on the other hand, you had, it looked early like when you were watching this game, South Carolina had so many opportunities to not only score, but to stay in this game and possibly give the Ole Miss Rebels an opportunity to be in a game. But it felt like after about the first quarter and a half, every time they made a mistake, which was, they had the one fumble and South Carolina had the one fumble. But it just never felt as though South Carolina could generate any offense against Ole Miss's defense, which is about as shocking as sticking a fork in an electrical outlet. I know, bad joke. Number 11 USC falls to unranked 2-3 Minnesota in Minneapolis, 24-17. Now, a lot of people are going to say, and this is why I have a problem with Wilbon saying that how tough the SEC is, because here's the reality. Knockoffs and major upsets happen in every conference. The reason being is not because of the difficulty of the conference, it's the difficulty of playing somebody that you see every single year. See, here's the thing. Most coaches don't change their approaches. They just change players. Most teams, the only way a team gets changed, and you get certain players. The players are the ones that cause you to change. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're changing your style every single year. Very few coaches are going to change their style predicated on their talent pool, unless it's so lack of talent that you have to do that. Most coaches are going to make sure they got at least the bare essentials that make their system run, whether it's offense, defense, or special teams. Do teams have a system on special teams? I mean, at least at the college level. I wondered. It's thought for another show. Well, looking here, the big thing I can honestly tell you is USC had this game going into the fourth quarter. But it was only 17-10. And I felt like many times that USC had the opportunity to put Minnesota away. I believed there was in the third quarter they had an opportunity to put it away. But then you look at the numbers. This is the most important number that has been showing up here, guys. Now, this is the only game that it did not rear its ugly head in, was the time possession, which USC actually won by about a minute. Well, more close to 2. But looking right here, you say to yourself, what made this work? And you know what that number is? The turnovers. USC had 3 of them. 2 interceptions and a fumble. How many times do I have to tell you guys, if you don't play your best ball and you make mistakes, it's generally going to cost you. And this is surprising given that USC was 7 of 11 on third downs and Minnesota was only 2 of 8. Not necessarily surprising. You look at total yards, USC 373, Minnesota 362. And the rushing, USC 173, Minnesota 193. What is Minnesota? What do we call Minnesota? We call them the baby Wisconsin. Or we call them the upside down Wisconsin. Or they call themselves the upside down dub. I know, that's not a good one. But USC also had 8 penalties for 59 yards. And that's not good when you're going into somebody else's house, regardless of how heavily favored you are. You have to play that game like you're going to win it. Not like they're just going to hand it to you. And too many times it felt like USC was kind of going through the motions per se. They would seem like they were a step slower than they usually are. And Miller Moss was 23 out of 38, 200 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 picks. And this is, look at this. You had Woody Marks run for 134 yards and a touchdown. You had Darius Taylor run for Minnesota, run for 144. No touchdowns, though. But what's surprising is that USC could not answer. That was the thing that got me, is they could not answer the bell in the fourth quarter. But the thing that is just got to be most disappointing to Lincoln Riley is they let Minnesota hang around. When it seemed like every time they got a stop or they made something happen, it just seemed like they just did not have an answer, and Minnesota did. And in turn, they were able to do what they needed to do to win this game, as Max Bosmer had, the quarterback, 15 and 19, had 3 rushing touchdowns. He only threw for 169, but he had 14 yards and 3 touchdowns. Boy, talk about his fantasy numbers.
What? Bruh.
I know. But the final, unranked Minnesota 24, number 11 USC 17. As we continue on into Black Saturday. Number 10 Michigan visits Seattle, and they come away with a 27-17 defeat at the hands of the Huskies. Now, this was a game I also said watch out for. We call those graveyard games. And honestly, Washington said, hey, look, y'all cost us a national championship. Now we're going to cost you one. And they did. We look at this game, we see Will Rogers was 21 of 31, 271 yards, 2 scores, an interception. Jonah Coleman, 80 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Jack Tuttle, 10 of 18, 98 yards passing, 1 touchdown and an interception. Alex Orji, 3 of 7, 15 yards. And Donovan Edwards, 95 yards on the ground for a touchdown. And listen, this is... If you're the Wolverines, you got to do something about the quarterback position. This is not even funny anymore. You have to figure this out. You have to get somebody that is going to be able to take command of that offense, grab it by the horns. You cannot have a defense that good, and you can't muster up any offense. Look at this. Michigan had only 17 first downs, and they gave up 23 first downs. It's not their fault, but then you look 4 of 12 on third downs. Total yards, 429 for the Huskies to 287 for the Wolverines.
Is that your best? That was pathetic.
That's unacceptable. But you had 174 yards on the ground to Washington's 114. And they were able to get, this is what's got to be concerning. They were able to get 315 yards in the air on Michigan's defense. Does that look like a reoccurring theme to you guys? Looks like shades of the Texas game, doesn't it? Yeah, and outside of that, you cannot afford to turn the football over. And they turned it over twice. So yeah, I mean, yeah, Washington may have been 3-2 and so on and so forth, but you couldn't afford to go into a hostile environment such as Seattle and think you're gonna walk out of there with a win. It just ain't gonna happen. And as I said, Michigan is going to have to solve this quarterback problem. This is just something that if all the elite teams are going to now, they understand that you cannot win a national championship unless you have an elite quarterback. Like Cam Ward of Miami. I don't know if y'all stayed up. I stayed up and watched this game, and it was fun. Trailing by 25 points at one point. This team came back. Oh my gosh, this is just, I will say there was another controversial call that was not made in this one. But yeah, somebody needs to have a talk with Miami's defense and say, you have an All-American Heisman Trophy possibly winning quarterback on your roster, and we got a chance to sneak in the door of the college football playoff and possibly be a bye and one of those super elite teams that have an opportunity to get a first round bye and then draw one of the weakest opponents, if not the weakest, with number 1 open. Did that slip out? My bad. Number 8, Miami, 39. California, 38. Heartbreaking. I didn't know. I was conflicted. I didn't know. I love Cam Ward, but then I love watching upsets. I love seeing the underdogs win. But Fernando Mendoza was 11 of 22, 285 yards, 2 touchdowns. How do you get 285 yards on 11 completed passes? And they did not run the ball well. Mendoza had 20 yards on the ground, but he is very good at spreading the football out. He had longs of 57, 56, 56, 51. Wow. Yeah, unreal. But looking over here at the Miami side, Mark Fletcher had 11 carries for 81 yards and a score. Then you see Xavier Restrepo. I am falling in love with this kid. 7 grabs, 163 yards, and he had the big run that set up the go-ahead touchdown. This guy just knows where to get. Isaiah Horton had 9 grabs, 83 yards. One thing you've got, Cam Ward, if he's going to, right now he's arguably going to win the Heisman Trophy unless he just has 2 really horrible games. But he's got to cut down on the interceptions. You know, they're becoming a part of his game now, and you don't want that to happen. He was 35 of 53, 437, impressing enough, but listen to that percentage. The completion percentage has gone down every single game. Now, I know what people are going to say. As long as they're winning, that's what you want. But you can't afford to keep you can't afford to keep making those type of mistakes. It's going to cost your team eventually. But the Hurricanes go into Berkeley, and they pick up a huge victory and saved their opportunity to stand tall inside the college football playoff and continue Cam Ward's bid for a Heisman Trophy, which that last drive was vintage. You guys got to go back and see it. It is vintage. But let us move on to number 7, Penn State, 27-11 victory over the UCLA Bruins, as the Bruins now fall to 1-4. Not much to this game. Franklin is a good coach, but I mean, the whiteout energy that they brought, blah. Drew Aller was 17-24, 237 yards and a score. Katron Allen, 78 yards on the ground. And Liam Clifford had 3 grabs for 107 yards, including a 57-yarder. But outside of that, it was same old Penn State boredom. I'm sorry, they're not a team I just get up in arms to go watch. I mean, they're going to win a lot of games, but they're going to have to show me they can beat a big-time program, and I haven't seen that at all. But they get the job done in this case. 27-11 as number 7 Penn State is victorious in their whiteout game at Happy Valley. As we will now move on to number 5, Georgia. Georgia's 31-13 victory over Auburn. Probably the only good thing we got out of this game was the Auburn Tigers found out. As a Notre Dame fan myself, I was looking to see if Deuce Knight was going to be in the stands at all. I didn't see him unless I went to commercial and I missed him. But that was about really the extent of me wanting to watch this football game, because I knew that this was not going to be much of a game. I will say this: do I think Auburn put up a pretty good fight? Because it was only 14-3 at the half, and Georgia only scored 17 in the second half. And Auburn actually showed they had a heartbeat in the second. Their offense had a heartbeat in the second half. As Carson Beck was 23 of 29, 240 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not bad, but when you throw and complete 23 passes, you would expect more. Trevor Etienne had 88 yards on the ground, 2 scores. But I will say this, it was a tough day at the office for the Auburn offense, as Ingram Dawkins had 2 sacks on the day, followed up by Chambliss with the sack for the Bulldogs. But you could even argue that Keldrick Falk, who had 2 sacks on his own. The defense of Auburn gave just as good as they took, and they tried to maintain the pace as much as they possibly could. But unfortunately, when you're dealing with, when you got a guy like Peyton Thorne at the helms, he's a good kid. I don't know if it's just the offense or whether he's just not comfortable in it, because he went 16-27, 200 yards passing. And Jaquez Hunter had 91 yards on 13 carries and a score. As well as Keandre Lambert-Smith had 7 grabs, 95 yards. So they've got some pieces at Auburn. So looking at Georgia, I think I don't know what to say about them. They did win this game coming back off of the loss to Alabama, but it's Auburn. And Auburn's not very good right now. I think what's going to happen is that they're going to get Deuce Knight in here, who is a Notre Dame flip. And that's probably the biggest plus that Auburn has heard in the last couple of weeks. He more than likely will be starting next year. Because right now, as I said, the quarterback situation in Auburn is nothing short of... I'm not going to say it. Number 4, Tennessee falls to unranked Arkansas in Fayetteville, 19-14. Now, there are a lot of people that are going to laugh and chuckle, and Georgia fans are notorious about this, and we'll get into them in a little bit later. But right now, we're looking at how the Arkansas Razorbacks pulled off an upset that I didn't necessarily call, but I said don't be surprised. Arkansas was 3-2, and this game was in their building. And I knew with Tennessee's high offense, all you really need was somebody that could get their hands on the football or get to Nico Iamaleava. That's what you have to do. You got to get to Nico Iamaleava. You can't let him sit back there. He'll pick you apart. And what I liked is that Arkansas had a game plan. Look at this, 17-29 for Iamaleava. 158 yards. I mean, and then what really kills me is Andrew Armstrong had 9 grabs for 132. That looks like Dante Thornton or Squirrel White's numbers. What is that? They did what they wanted to do, and what I thought was just interesting is you're looking at Larry Worth III, Steven Dix, Landon Jackson, all had half sacks. Eric Gregory had a sack and a half. If you walked into this game, and even Cameron Ball had a sack, they had 4 sacks on the night. And the reality of it is they never stopped trying to put pressure on Iamaleava. Taylor Green went 19 of 27, 266. He looked more like Iamaleava than Iamaleava did. Yeah, I'm having fun. If I'm butchering his name, somebody let me know. I said it 1,000 times. That's why I'm trying to put it out there. But as I said, Dylan Sampson had a good game, 138 for 2 scores. What I find interesting is that Tennessee got concerned when they got behind. Because see, here's the thing. They didn't get behind until late in this game. Tennessee was controlling the pace. And that was what was crazy about it. You watched it and you thought, man, when is Tennessee going to put the gas on? When are they going to put the gas on? And see, here's the thing. That number again that we were talking about. Time of possession. Arkansas took their time. And see, this is the danger that Tennessee's going to have to, that they're going to walk that razor's edge with. Knowing when to go fast and knowing when to slow it down. Because that's what Arkansas did. Look at that, 35 and a half minutes they had the ball to Tennessee's 24 and a half. Now, I know we've seen games where they've been able to win with least amount of time, but eventually you're going to have to figure out what games you're not going to be able to do this in. The rushing numbers. You look at the rushing numbers. Tennessee wins it. You look at the passing numbers. This is where Arkansas won the game. 431 to 332 in total yards. That in itself is an omen. Number 4, Tennessee, 14. Unranked Arkansas, 19. Number 3, Ohio State, 35. Unranked Iowa, 7. Now, this was a game that had the potential to be a real snoozer. And for one half, it was. 7-0 at the half, Ohio State. It ended up being 35-7 Ohio State. But you look at this game, and it just had all the markings of a snooze fest.
Bruh.
21 first downs for the Ohio State Buckeyes and only 10 for the Buckeyes. Only 10 for the Hawkeyes. 412 total yards for the Buckeyes, 226 for the Hawkeyes. Y'all got to get some offense. And that's what I said. Y'all got to get some offense. And then they actually threw an interception. And here's the other thing that kills you. They had 3 turnovers. Ohio State did have 2, but when you know you're coming in with a deficit like this, you can't afford to turn the ball over more than the other team. You can't even afford to have a deficit, have to be even up. You got to have a plus. Not to mention you lost the time of possession battle horribly. Listen, if you don't take any advice from Mr. CeeLo, the keys to winning and taking an upset, you have to win the time of possession. All you need is these 2 key factors. Win the time of possession and win the turnover battle. You don't have to win anything else. The scoreboard will take care of itself. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, you got to score points. That's obvious. But if you keep the ball away from teams, they can't score unless they have the football. Unless you're going to, and then, like I said, if you don't turn it over and you hold on to the football at least 2/3 of the game or close to it, you can win the game. Because the other team can't win without the ball. They get safety after safety after safety. They get 3 safeties. You score a touchdown, kick an extra point, you still win the game. Ohio State 35, Iowa 7. Number 1, Alabama 35, Vanderbilt 40. Now, I watched this game from about the second quarter on. And I'm going to be honest with you. looking at this game, there were so many breaks that this football team got. And I'm not here to make excuses for Alabama. I'm just already sick and tired of hearing the Georgia fans talking about, yeah, they suck. You got beat by Vanderbilt.
Is that your best? That was pathetic.
And you got beat by Bama. Shut up. Now, with that being said, the thing that got my attention about this game was as I was looking at the numbers as far as the team's stats go. I did not realize that Alabama only had 17 first downs in this game. But then I also had to look at another number that was quite interesting. 42 minutes the Vanderbilt Commodores had the football compared to nearly 18 minutes the Tide had it. What did Mr. CeeLo just tell y'all? Time of possession, turnovers. Now watch this, y'all. See, this is why I said everybody that's laughing about at Alabama, I want you guys to take Mr. CeeLo's tips. Look here. Alabama, 2 turnovers. Vanderbilt, none. How many teams can say when they go into a game and they actually win the turnover battle, and then it takes a lot to win the time of possession battle on top of that? This is not something you can just pull out of your hat and say, hey, I'm going to do this. It ain't easy. Vanderbilt had the perfect plan because they also had the perfect amount of weapons. Look at this. 17 minutes, Alabama was able to almost put up 400 yards at 394 of total offense. 43 minutes, Vanderbilt only had 418. They were 12 of 18 on third down, so Bama couldn't get off the field. Their defense could not get off the field. Then they had 166 yards on the ground. Let's also take a look at something else. There's been a lot of talk about Diego Pavia, who was 16 of 20, 252 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was good. Milroe was 18 of 24, 310, had a touchdown and a pick. But we cannot take away from Cedric Alexander, who was also a key part of what they did. But Pavia's running ability and his dual threat ability is what really made this. They basically gave Alabama a taste of their own medicine, because when Jalen Milroe, he ran it 7 times for 10 yards. Not overly impressive. That's not what you can get. Nothing compared to the near 100 yards or 100-yard performance he gave against Georgia last week. I think if you're Kalen DeBoer, you got to go back to the drawing board and say, look, this guy's got to touch the football and he's got to run it. You went out there thinking you were just going to throw it all over the yard and it was going to work. That's great thought, but Vanderbilt came out here to beat you. And then, of course, one of my favorite players in the entire country, Ryan Williams, 3 grabs, 82 yards, including that 58-yard where he air moonwalked his way into the end zone. Still one of my favorite players, but at the end of the day, they didn't get the dub. Vanderbilt came out with the perfect game plan. They did it. They were more physical at the line of scrimmage. And I've never seen Alabama come out not necessarily saying they're flat, but I think what it was, they came out and took Vanderbilt lightly, and I don't think Nick Saban will be saying what he said in pregame yet again, which was easy place to play at in the SEC. I don't think you want to say that again. Congrats to Vanderbilt as they get their first ever victory over a number 1 football team, a number 1 ranked football team. Alabama's going to have to go back and get it figured out before this week, as they will get back into their SEC schedule and get it done. So now let us take a look and see what the top 25 looks like right now. SMU moves into the top 25 on the heels of their victory against Louisville. Michigan drops 14 spots in their loss to unranked Washington to number 24. Illinois moves up 1 spot to number 23. Undefeated Pittsburgh Panthers are at 5-0, and they move up the They move into the top 25 to number 22. Missouri, on the heels of their massive implosion at Texas A&M, dropped 12 down to 21. Indiana, Kansas State, and Oklahoma are tied for are all number 18, as Kansas State moves up 2, Oklahoma 1, Indiana 5, and they are 6-0. Then you got Boise State moving up to number 17, moving up 4 spots. Then the Utah Utes move up 2, up to number 16. Texas A&M, on the heels of that massive blowout win over Missouri at home, moves up 10 spots. That's too high. To number 15. The BYU moves up 3 spots to number 14, being undefeated at 5-0. LSU stays put at 4-1. Iowa State and Notre Dame are. Iowa State moves up 5. Notre Dame moves up 3. They are both number 11. Clemson moves up 5 on the heels of a victory against an unranked Florida State team. No. They are now number 10. Ole Miss moves up 3 despite being beaten by an unranked Kentucky team last week. SEC favoritism.
It's official. You suck.
Tennessee moves down 4 spots to number 8. See, I don't understand. This makes no sense. These rankings make no sense. It's like they pick and choose who they want to drop down. Alabama moves down 6 spots to number 7. Miami goes up 2 spots to number 6. Georgia stays put at number 5. Not sure about that one. Penn State goes up to number 3. Goes up to number 4, moving up 3 spots. Oregon goes up 3 spots to number 3. Ohio State goes up a spot to number 2, and Texas goes back into number 1, like I said. Junior, who cares? Let me know what you guys think, because this is not something I agree with. You guys already know. I will voice my thoughts, and I will not apologize for them. As Black Saturday has wrapped up, more than likely we won't have another Saturday like this. Now, we'll have some Saturdays where it's competitive, but you will not see another Saturday this year where you're seeing unranked teams just putting it down and swiping away at the teams that have those beautiful numeral numbers in the front. But I hope you guys are doing great. I hope you guys are still recovering okay and everything is good. Make sure you go comment down at the bottom. Tell me what I missed, what you think I should. Am I being too harsh on your team? So on and so forth. Also comment, and if you like and subscribe to the show, you guys, please make sure that you put your name down in the bottom so I can know who you are, recognize you, and put you in the family. Finally, go to Instagram and check me out on Instagram at Mr. CeeLo and see what things I'm also involved in. Also, go to the webpage, Gridiron Gab Triple Option, and find out what other things I'm involved in and see if what polls on there you'd like to participate in. But until we meet again, same Gab channel, same Gab platform.